Hey, it's Chris Hassel and Andrew Downs from Instant Iowa, the fastest reaction to every Hawkeye football game. Maybe the most emotional as well.
Yeah, celebrate with us when they win, commiserate with us when they lose. Either way, we're going to be here.
Yes, we will, right here on Iowa Everywhere, instantly after every Hawkeye football game.
Time for Hawks on Tap, proudly poured by Bud Light, featuring Andrew Downs and the best Iowa media personalities. Live from Buffalo Wild Wings across Iowa.
And welcome to Hawks on Tap here on Iowa Everywhere. My name is Andrew Downs, here with you once again as we head into the season finale, the regular season finale for Hawkeye football. And I'm joined by my friend and yours, Todd Brommelkamp. What's up, Todd?
We're not at Buffalo Wild Wings. What's going on?
I know, right? It's kind of crazy. First of all, we have an 11 a.m. game for the first time this season, so like a morning Hawks on Tap show. I'm not going to be slamming Bud Lights like I normally do on this show. And yeah, I was supposed to be in the Sioux City Buffalo Wild Wings, but with the incoming weather, I was going to stay there for the game and do the Instant Iowa from there, but I didn't want to get stuck in Sioux City all weekend. And, I mean, they're talking, I don't know what it's like in Cedar Rapids. They're saying 10 inches of snow here in Des Moines. And, you know, I know this is Iowa and it's winter and we're mostly ready for it, but the first snow event is always a little weird. First time driving in it. So we called an audible. I asked, hey, can I just stay home? They were very cool about it. Buffalo Wild Wings has been a great partner all season long. We're going to try to put something together for a bowl show, potentially a basketball thing here and there too. So not at Buffalo Wild Wings today, but we're still doing the show.
Yeah, you know, this is kind of the first snowstorms, kind of like how Kirk likes the non-conference schedule. You know, you want your Albanys or your UMasses. You don't want to come guns blazing with a top 25 team. 10 inches for the first snowfall is a little bit too much. So, yeah, it's
a really good
crazy
analogy
over here because everybody's battening down the hatches. So we'll see what happens.
That's a great analogy. I think you're exactly right. Like you know, you get the sprinkling, you get the dusting, you get the Albany of 2 inches maybe, just enough to make sure the snowblower will still start. Enough.
I had a really lazy Thanksgiving yesterday. I had one job, and that was to make sure that the snowblower was going to start. So
there you go.
Thing fired up, and we're ready for whatever Mother Nature throws at us.
Boom. A Black Friday special, again, ahead of the Heroes game between Iowa and Nebraska, 11 a.m. today over in Lincoln, Nebraska. It doesn't seem like the snow is going to affect the game at all. Maybe they'll get a little bit as the game moves into the later stages, but you know, there was a time about a week ago where it felt like, hey, there was talk of like a blizzard on Thanksgiving, or maybe the blizzard would be happening during this game. Doesn't seem like this is going to be a heavily affected game due to the weather. It's going to be cold. Maybe the first real cold game Iowa's played all year.
Yeah, and I remember in years past, there's been a couple games over there in Lincoln on Black Friday that have been very cold. So, can I think the last time it was really cold over there? Was a walk-off field goal, if I recall correctly, and somebody was celebrating. So
yeah, well, I mean that doesn't narrow it down too much, believe it or not.
Yeah,
and we'll get to that as we move through the show here. Thank you for filling in for me last week on Instant Iowa. I was down in SEC country.
I was just pissing everybody off left and right.
Hey, that's
on Saturday.
What you do. That's great. That was a fun show. I listened to it after the fact. It was a weird day for me. It was the first Hawkeye game that I've been completely unplugged for in years, because usually even if you have an event in Iowa, people are around you, are talking about the game. They're following the game. It's on a TV somewhere, even if you're at a wedding or something like that. People make sure you can understand what's going on. I was in Mississippi where nobody gave a shit about a mid-tier Big Ten game between Iowa and Michigan State. I mean, people thought it was crazy that I even cared about it. And so I was as unplugged as you could get, other than the occasional update from my dad or somebody like that. And then when those updates did come in, I was like, maybe just stop. Just stop updating me. I don't know that I want to ruin this evening with finding out what happened here. But you and Hassel did a great show, and yeah, I appreciate not only that, but you joined me so much this year on Hawks on Tap. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has. And we had a guy come in the dealership. It was during the first half. He had a Hawkeye sweatshirt on. I kind of gave him a hard time about missing the game, and he was like, I'm DVRing it. Don't. And I was like, I wouldn't say you're missing anything right now. But luckily the Hawks were able to turn things around in the second half, and he had something to look forward to when he got home.
Well, we will get to that here in just a couple of minutes. Again, big shout out to Buffalo Wild Wings, who's been a great partner with us all season long. We've been all over the state with them. We're supposed to be in Sioux City today, and they were very cool about us calling this audible. So appreciate Jake and the entire crew with Buffalo Wild Wings. Just because I'm not at a Buffalo Wild Wings right now doesn't mean you shouldn't be headed to a Buffalo Wild Wings today to watch this Iowa-Nebraska game and all the action today. Hey, the Bears play this afternoon. It's a
great. Today's a great football day.
We have a big football weekend, right? I mean, it's and Buffalo Wild Wings is such a great place. Look, I know Thanksgiving is a lot of fun. I like eating the food as much as you do. You don't want to be eating Thanksgiving leftover scraps all day today. Go out and get some wings, get some Bud Lights, go to a Buffalo Wild Wings. You got all the games on. I'm sure all the ones here in Iowa and in the Nebraska area will have the game up and sound up and all of that. And so definitely get out to a Buffalo Wild Wings and cheer on the Hawkeyes. Again, a big shout out to them and also to Bud Light, who's been a great partner with us as well. And again, I'm not going to have a Bud Light at 9:40 in the morning, at least not unless I was tailgating. It's funny how if you drink tailgating early if you're tailgating 6 a.m. is too late for your first beer. If you're at home, you crack open a beer at 9:30. The wife starts to give you some looks.
Yeah, I got to go back to my real job after this too, so don't want to come in with that Bud Light on my breath. Probably wouldn't go over too well.
But hey, $4 Bud Lights, the Tall Boys, not just today, every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of football season. Also, we've got some basketball tickets to give away as we have the last several weeks on this show, also on Instant Iowa. The Iowa men's basketball team is going to the Casey Center Saturday, December 20th. It's getting closer and closer. They play against Bucknell. Hey, Todd, guess where I'm going to be sitting in that game?
I just have a hunch you're going to bring up your courtside seats.
Yeah, I'm going to be sitting court. I bought them the day they went on sale, Todd. You got to support this team.
Yeah, you got to support the team.
We got to.
Like I said, Saturday I was just throwing bombs everywhere. You probably caught a little shrapnel. So sorry.
Yeah, I was listening Sunday morning as I was packing up, getting ready to go to the airport, and just every time I could feel it coming each time. It's like, oh, here we go.
Hey man, you've got like the crystal ball. You saw it before anybody else. I mean, this team's fun to watch.
They are, man, and we're going to definitely talk some hoops here because you got the Acrisure champions, your Iowa Hawkeyes. I think Group 2, Acrisure Group 2 champ, whatever that means. But hey, a couple of nice wins this week, and we'll talk about that. But this game, Saturday the 20th, it's at the Casey Center here in Des Moines, a 5 o'clock tip. Tickets are available right now at HyVeeTix.com, but we're going to give away a pair on this show today. We need you to enter the hashtag, however you're watching, however you're joining us, enter the hashtag Koch, K-O-C-H, Koch. That's in honor of Cooper Koch, who scored in double figures each of the last 3 games. I saw Jordan Bohannon tweeted Cooper Koch might be his favorite player ever, and Jordan Bohannon's my favorite player ever. So by the transitive property, I now love Cooper Koch. But he's the one guy who stayed. Maybe 2 guys stayed, but he's the one big kind of name that Ben McCollum had pointed at and said, "Hey, I want you on this team." He stayed, and his role has kind of increased as the early season has gone on. The Hawkeyes 7-0 right now. The Iowa women 7-0 right now. I mean, things are good in basketball world for the Hawkeyes. So hashtag Koch. We will give those tickets out before we get out of here, and we'll talk a little bit more basketball as we wrap up the show today. Again, let's look back a little bit before we look forward. And I'm going to have to lean on you here a bit, Todd, because I did go back and watch some of the highlights of the game. I've listened to all the podcasts and done all the shows, but I did not watch the Iowa-Michigan State game live because I was at that wedding in SEC country. So basically what I glean are 3 things. Caden Weechin played incredibly well and is probably the reason Iowa stayed in the game. He had that touchdown in the first half, which broke Tim Dwight's record at Iowa for return touchdowns. Anytime you do anything that has Tim Dwight's name in it, it's a tip of the cap. Yeah. Almost certainly going to be the Big Ten returner of the year, probably the All-American first-team returner of the year for a second straight season. So he is a huge reason why Iowa was able to stay in that game. The second thing I gleaned from that game is Iowa's offense was just awful. I mean, from everything I hear, until the final minutes, when Jacob Gill and Reese Vanderzee made two of the best catches we've seen from Iowa receivers in years. And Mark Gronowski and his kind of poise at the end of these games came through again, and I was able to find a way to come up with a win and really, more importantly, avoid a bad loss, which they haven't had yet this season. And then third, generally, the team just wasn't as crisp, didn't seem as focused as we've seen most of the games this season. You know, you've been pretty realistic about this team all year. I've kind of been in the mindset of, man, they're so close against these good teams. They're not going to have any trouble with teams that are worse than them. Yeah. That wasn't the case on Saturday. They had some trouble with a team that's definitely worse than Iowa.
Yeah, and Hassel and I talked about this after the game. I think, you know, you were expecting maybe more of a Wisconsin-Minnesota type game where, you know, they were clearly better than them, and so they were going to show it. And instead you got, you know, Oregon, Indiana, and you weren't expecting that out of Michigan State. But, looking back, do you chalk it up to senior day? Some teams handle the emotions of that better than others. Was Michigan State extra motivated? You know, at the end of the day, you know, it was a win, and, you know, always better than a loss. But it was just one of those ones that was hard to swallow, especially given some of the play calling and the way that they looked in the first half. But the more and more I think about it, it kind of, you know, people like to joke about NBA games where you only have to watch the last 2 minutes. Yeah, that kind of played out like an NBA game. Just forget everything that happened in the first three quarters, watch the last 5 or 6 minutes of that game, and you would think that Mark Gronowski balled out the entire time because he made some Sunday throws in that fourth quarter, and Iowa's guys made some Sunday catches too, and that's the reason we're still talking about 8-4 even being a possibility today.
Which like, if I tip the scales for Mark Gronowski, which tips for you? Is it his tendency to start out shaky? We've seen it more than once. We saw it to start the season, but weird underthrows. I mean, he had a throw that hit the crossbar of the field goal unit on Saturday. So his tendency to start out shaky, but then his tendency to stay poised and lead this team, even when it doesn't ultimately become a game-winning score, more often than not, lead this team to a late score, put this team in a position to find itself in a position to win. When you tip those scales, like, which one goes down for you? Is it the shakiness and the inconsistency, or is it that poise and that senior leadership and that the big game moments that he's had all year?
I think it's the big game moments. Look, we've seen Iowa start and end with shaky. I'll take shaky for 3 quarters, and then this guy is the all-time wins leader in college football, and it shows. Like, I'm not going to drag any quarterbacks in by name here or anything, but yeah, you know, a lot of them recently have looked the same in the fourth quarter as they did in the first quarter. Maybe I'm a little bit more generous, or I've got more leeway, but I'm willing to overlook a slow start when you finish the way that he did, and he basically put some lipstick on the pig in the fourth quarter and bailed Iowa out. I mean, we can talk about Caden Weechin, till you're blue in the face, and Stevens making field goals, but that was Mark Gronowski basically pulling them out of the fire and winning that game last Saturday.
Yeah, finding ways. And I mean, really, like, having the confidence in his receivers to go up and get balls that maybe he wouldn't have even thrown at the first half of the year. And it was so long without Reese Vanderzee, and there was so much talk about, hey, that's his guy. That's the connection that they had all off season. Obviously, Jacob Gill went up and got that in the end zone, and that was a fantastic play. But the Vanderzee catch that set up the game-winning field goal, where he kind of fumbles the ball a little bit and stays with it. But again, for Gronowski to have the faith in those guys to put those balls up in the air, which, you know, if either of those are intercepted, that's the game. To have faith in those receivers, I thought that showed a lot as well.
You know, he has just a little bit of Drew Tate tendency to him, in where, you know, if he throws a 3-0 fastball down the middle and it gets tattooed for a home run, he shakes it off and comes back. He's not afraid to try to keep finding those receivers and making those throws. And I think, again, that's something that sets him apart, is that, you know, he isn't afraid to make those mistakes. He doesn't really get down on himself. And any quarterback that did not have his mental fortitude probably doesn't have the fourth quarter that he did last Saturday. So again, you take the good and the bad with him, and you've got him now for 2 more games, including today. Let's see what Iowa has in him before turning the page.
You know, Todd, I think you've been pretty realistic about this team all season. And as we've gone through, I mean, you didn't have them 10-2 to start the
Nope.
season. You know, you didn't have them going to the playoff. And then even as we've kind of gone along, and we felt at times like this team is pretty good, and they're close with some of these elite teams. And you know, I don't think you picked them to win a bunch of those games. Like it's kind of gone the way you've expected it to go. You haven't gotten out above your skis when Iowa has looked good. I was surprised that this team had that kind of game in them against Michigan State. Now, more often than not, Ferentz teams seem to find a way to lose to a team, or they play to their competition, right? And they'll lose a game that you scratch your head about. And I understand they hadn't finished the 4 big games that they had this year, and that is what it is. But I didn't think they were capable of losing to a team like Michigan State. And honestly, before last Saturday, I didn't think they were capable of losing a game like this to Nebraska that we'll see later today.
Yeah.
But now, having seen that game against Michigan State, it gives me a little bit of pause. So was last week an outlier, or does it signal something like, hey, this team is kind of susceptible to playing down to its competition as well?
It's a great question, and I think the optimist in you wants to chalk it up to it being an outlier, because the more I think about it, I still think that they were superior to Michigan State in every way last week, and that should have gone the way of those Minnesota-Wisconsin games where you get another blowout. And you know, I expected to be talking about the backup quarterback last week. I expected to be talking about him because he got some reps while Iowa was up 30 points instead of, you know, he's warming up on the sidelines, and did they bring him in? So I agree. I think for the pessimists out there, last week's game probably leads them to maybe have a little bit more concern today, because Nebraska has not looked great. They certainly didn't look great going to Happy Valley last week, but there's a lot of teams that don't look good going to Happy Valley. But I have a feeling, I don't want to speak for Hawkeye fans in general here, but given the performance last week and the fact that this game is in Lincoln today, yeah, maybe there's a little bit more concern than there was a week or two ago.
And as cliche as it is, this is one of those games where you kind of throw out the records, right? I mean, we've seen over the last 10 years, these games have more often than not been very close. And again, we'll dive into that a little deeper as we move forward. Before we get into Nebraska, well, I guess 2 things. At any point during that Michigan State game, because it's something I saw a lot on social media, were you ready for a second quarterback? Were you ready to see Mark Gronowski be sat down? I mean, was he that bad? And I guess, did you have that little confidence that he could find a way to make those final throws?
I think I was ready for it when they actually talked about Helinski warming up on the sideline, because until Kirk gives you that little carrot on the stick, you're not really thinking it's going to happen. No. And so I think, you know, hindsight being what it is, I think the right call was made, and he looked and said, you know what, this guy's a winner, and if we're going to win this game, we're going to lose this game, we're going to win it or lose it with him. So, I think they made the right call to stick with him, and I'd probably still say that even if they had lost the game, to be honest with you.
And then the other thing, a big topic of conversation this week, obviously, after Caden Weechin broke Tim Dwight's record for return touchdowns, which, again, is just a wild thing. And what Weechin has done over these last couple of seasons has been incredible. We've seen a lot of really good returners at Iowa. Back to Tim Dwight, probably back before that. You've been around the program a long time. Cooper DeJean is as good as anybody. Amir Smith-Marset and Desmond King were we've had a lot of very good returners. Yeah. Where does Caden Weechin rank on your list of guys that you've seen?
He is certainly up there. I talked about this with Hassel on the post game and had a little bit of time now to marinate on it. But there's just certain names at Iowa where when you're above them in the record book, it means something. You know, you pass Niall Kinnick, you pass Chuck Long. Those are big, and Tim Dwight's one of those names, especially for people of our age and a little bit older. You know, Superman wears number 6. He's a little bit different player. He's not quite as physically, yoked out as Tim Dwight was. But man, there's the record book speaks for itself there. You know, he may not go on to play on Sundays in the NFL. He may not have a return for a touchdown in a Super Bowl like Tim Dwight did. But what Caden Weechin has done, coming in as a walk-on from, Williamsburg, which is an Iowa version of a suburb for Iowa. Anything in that 20, 25 mile an hour mile radius. Just a great story and a great kid, and just continue to work hard and make the most out of his talents. And man, it's like the game is on a different speed for him. It's like almost a Matrix where he can make moves in real time and everybody else is in slow motion. I've never been the fastest guy in the world, so I don't even know what that must feel like for him. But his vision of the field, especially when he's returning kicks or punts, is hands down the best in the Big Ten. He has been so fun to watch. And I asked Hassel this. I'll ask you this last week. What would they be without him this season? Because you're looking way closer to 6-6 than you are 8-4.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's one of those performances in a season. And you really look back to the Iowa State game, and if he just has like a decent game in that game, you wonder if Iowa finds a way to win that game, because he had that bad penalty on the opening kickoff, a couple of bad decisions to try to return. He slipped on the interception that Gronowski threw, which led to Iowa State's, I think, only touchdown in that game. And, that's really like the one bad game he's had all season. And you saw what Iowa was unable to do in that game. So, yeah, you take him out. I agree. You're closer to 6-6. It's one of those things where he makes such a big difference, even when he's not scoring touchdowns, putting Iowa in good field position. He's made big plays offensively, and hopefully we'll be able to do that again today. So yeah, I think he's certainly in the conversation when you talk about MVP of the season. Caden Weechin is right atop that list, I think. Reminder, hashtag Koch, K-O-C-H, if you want to go to the Iowa men's basketball game at the Casey Center on December 20th. We'll give those tickets away at the end of the show. Let's look to Nebraska a little bit and some big picture stuff before we dive in today's specific matchup, Todd. How has this rivalry developed in your mind since Nebraska came into the Big Ten, and since this became kind of a marquee game on both teams' schedules? It's certainly been dominated by Iowa over the last 10 years, won 9 of the last 10, had a chance to win that 10th one. If Cooper DeJean doesn't get hurt, maybe does win that 10th one. So it's certainly been lopsided, but there's been a lot of vitriol. The fans certainly get into it. It's Black Friday, which I think this is the last year it's on Black Friday, which really kind of sucks. But how has this rivalry developed for you as you've watched it over the last 12, 15 years?
Yeah, AD, it's really interesting because, east of Des Moines, the further east you get, I think the less vitriol there really is for Nebraska, but that's changed over the years. And I think there's a number of things, you still have that living in the past mentality that a lot of the Nebraska fan base brings in, and things like the sellout streak. And they make a very convenient piñata of themselves at times. And the fact that, Iowa has had the upper hand in the series, regardless of who the last 3 or 4 coaches have been, the fact that it comes down more often than not to a one-score game, and a lot of times it's come down to the last play of the game. I wasn't a huge fan of trying to force this as a rivalry, but it's very naturally over the last decade plus become one, just by the very nature of how some of those games have finished. The fact that a lot of times a trip to Indianapolis was on the line for one of the teams more often than not Iowa, and you got the spoiler role there. I felt like it was, a laboratory created diamond, and I'm not a big fan on doing that. I like nature taking its course, but I think over the last decade or so, that's what we've seen here with the rivalry is nature has taken its course, and it's really become an honest to goodness rivalry because of what's taken place on the football field. And I'm not expecting anything different today. I have a feeling this is going to be another one of those low scoring, try not to make a mistake and just be happy that you get out of Lincoln. I've been inside that locker room after a couple games in Lincoln where they're breathing a sigh of relief. They're just happy to get on the bus and get out of town. And that could be another one of these games today.
Well, Iowa has won 9 of the last 10. The last 7 have all been decided by one score, including 4 game-winning field goals for the Hawkeyes in that span. Hey, let's take a look and a listen back at some of those finishes.
The kick is on the way. It is good.
Look at Racinos is running for his life.
They're chasing Miguel Racinos. through the opposite end zone. It is good! Good! Keith Duncan, wearing Babe Ruth's number, has just hit it out of the park.
Marshall Meter trying to get out of town with a Hawkeye victory. Here's the snap. The kick is on the way, and it is good! Good! The game comes down, at least in regulation, to this 53-yard field goal attempt by Drew Stevens. The snap, the spot, the kick is on the way. It is good! Iowa wins it 13-10.
Incredible. I think the most memorable of those is probably the Keith Duncan because of the blowing kisses to Scott Frost and the iconic shot of him there. But man, that Marshall Meter is one of those games and stories that will live forever in Hawkeye lore. I mean, this guy kicked one field goal. It had to go 38 yards. It went probably 39. And I mean, for Iowa to find a way to win that game, I mean, some of these have just been incredible.
He's up there, he's in that ranks with Warren Holloway, right? Where you made one play, but damn, that one play is pretty memorable. And let's not forget, Drew Stevens was on the other side of that. He had performed poorly, and so for all the people out there that say Kirk Ferentz never makes a change, and maybe quarterback's a little bit different, but he made a change that day, put a guy out there that had everybody scrambling for their roster cards, trying to figure out who this guy was, and it turned out to be the right call. And that also, I think, motivated Drew Stevens to do what we've seen over him the last couple years. So, boy, it would be fun. Probably not fun for Iowa fans because it would mean another
stressful
game. But how great would it be if it came down to another last? And this time it was Drew Stevens that got to go out there and kick the game-winning field goal. Just a complete and total redemption arc.
As tough as that is to watch these games when it's a nail-biter and you don't see how Iowa's going to find a way, as stressful as that is in the moment, man, to just have Nebraska take kick to the stones after kick to the stones in this rivalry, there is something really sweet about it.
Yeah,
there is something fun about it. And it's just got to be so infuriating for Nebraska fans, especially those who are like our age, who grew up with the Nebraska that was, winning national championships and considered, one of the best programs in the country. And now you can't even beat Iowa, even in games where you feel like you should beat Iowa. There was that game, was it 21, where Iowa was down big and they blocked that punt for a touchdown. And I think they were still down by like 9. But after the game, Scott Frost said, when that happened, we knew the game was over. And it was like, man, you were still up by 2 scores. What are you talking about? Like, Iowa has just had their number, been in their heads. What's more true? Iowa finds ways to win this game, or Nebraska finds ways to lose this game?
That feels like a loaded question, but I think I'm going to give you my honest answer. It just feels like Nebraska has found a way to lose a lot of these games.
Yeah.
And it goes back, beyond, Matt Rule, Scott Frost, going back now all the way back to Bo Pelini, really. I mean, the last 4 coaches, they've all found ways to lose this game at certain times. And my favorite part of I miss being in Lincoln today. I really grew to embrace that Black Friday game and the ritual of going over on Thanksgiving night and staying I had the same hotel. I had the same, you stop at the Hy-Vee right before you cross the river and get a 6-pack of beer to throw on ice in the hotel. And my favorite part about driving home was always listening to the post-game shows on the call in. It makes the old sound off days look like child's play. You got Larry and Hastings calling in to just absolutely melt down. And so that's what I'm going to miss the most about not being there today, is being able to listen to the post game shows on the drive home. But this is a big game. It's a big game for Matt Rule because here we are once again with that program trying to take a big step forward, and kind of feel like he is in a similar position that PJ Fleck was in up in Minneapolis a couple, until you beat Iowa, until you get that sort of monkey off your back, people are going to still be talking about it. And they want to take that next step forward. And it would be a huge, huge springboard for them to do so if they won this game today.
Yeah, both teams come in at 7-4, and as you just said, it feels like a big game for Nebraska and kind of the momentum of the program. They have failed in a lot of ways, like Iowa has this year, right? They haven't gotten that ranked loss streak off their back. They haven't come up big in the big moments, but they're certainly an improved team under Matt Rule than they were under Scott Frost. It feels like generally the program is heading in the right direction. Now it sounds like Dylan Raiola will not be there next year. His little brother is decommitted. It sounds like he's headed to the transfer portal. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. They have a good recruiting class coming in these next couple of seasons, and again with Matt Rule getting that extension this year, with the specter of the Penn State job out there, seems like he's there at least for the next few years. And so this does feel like a huge game for him and for the program, because if they lose again to Iowa, it doesn't matter what bowl game they go to, doesn't matter what they do in that game, it is going to feel like, man, there's this ceiling to this program right now. And it's not the Ohio State, Michigan, now Indiana, Penn State, Oregon ceiling, right? It's not the upper tier of the Big Ten that we can't quite get into. It's, man, we can't really compete with like the better teams in the middle tier of the Big Ten. And I think that's going to be a real tough pill for Nebraska Nation to swallow. And going into an offseason, that's, again, one of the reasons this game has been so pivotal for both programs over the last decade is you now go into an offseason. You don't have another game to wash out the taste out of your mouth a week from now. You have a bowl game, but again, bowl games mean less and less every year. This is how we will feel about Iowa and Nebraska moving forward, however they play today.
Yeah, and they'll take 25,000 people to a bowl game if they win today. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Bowl Scouts in that press box today and watching this one. And it's just a matter of what comes down to taking place on the field. And I haven't been able to get a good read on this Nebraska team all season long. And then when they lost Raiola, they didn't really show a ton of fight last week at Penn State, but Matt Rule is going to make sure that they know how much is on the line when they take the field today here in just a little bit. And, sometimes teams can rise to that pressure and then sometimes they can fold. And so we'll find out, I think, early on whether or not this team is going to answer that call and show up today and make Iowa work for this one.
It'd be interesting to see if I think the other thing Matt Rule probably has, put a lot of weight on this week is, hey, don't give them anything pre-game.
Well, they did enough of that last year.
Yeah, I'm saying, right?
The who's Jay Higgins,
yes.
And I think somebody brought up Adam on the comments brought up the not shaking hands last year. So it's whether or not they're making a concerted effort not to give Iowa anything this year. I think they gave them plenty last year because there were enough guys in that locker room that remember how things went down last year. Iowa's not going to be lacking for motivation today. But we talked about it.
Yeah.
Is it Iowa winning or Nebraska losing? And part of that has been Nebraska's coaches and players have given Iowa a lot of ammunition over the years. You can't do that in a rivalry game.
Yeah, the way you can lose to a team 9 out of 10 years and still have no respect for them is really kind of wild. And year after year, Iowa uses that as motivation.
Yeah.
Very little tangibly on the line for Iowa today, right? There's the Heroes Trophy, which is a forced trophy. There's a rivalry win, which is more important than the trophy. There's a bowl destination. I've seen Vegas or Tampa, kind of depending on how today goes. But really, that doesn't mean a whole lot. So, what does this game mean for the Hawkeyes? What does a win do versus what a loss does as we head into a long off season?
Yeah, I think a win still buys I hate to say buys Kirk Ferentz more time, but we all know his age. We all know the contract situation, and it's going to be a lot easier to, get ready for him coming back for another year if you're 8-4 and going to a better bowl game than, I think a lot of it's going to come down to what happens in the bowl game because that's the last taste that gets left in your mouth.
Yeah.
But, 8-4 regular season finish, beating Nebraska, probably going to, I think the Outback Bowl, the ReliaQuest Bowl would really like to have Kirk back one more time before he retires. So this just seems like that type of year now with 3 Big Ten teams going to the playoffs. And what does that look like for the other, the Citrus Bowl and all of that. I've never been good at prognosticating that, but I think there's a little bit on the line here for Iowa today, and 8-4 just. I know people like to dog on 8-4 Ferentz, but 8-4 is better than 7-5, no matter how you slice it. And I think 8-4 to me, they win today, and it means they were right where I expected them to be all season long, and they didn't really overstep their bounds, didn't really fall off the pace a whole lot. So I agree with you. Tangibly, there's a win to play for today. Right. A manufactured trophy, like you said. There's a little bit of state pride, but it's not like the old days. You don't even have that Indianapolis trip that's hanging out there right now with the supersized Big Ten. So once they lost to USC and the playoff picture kind of went poof for them, I do hate to say it because we're a byproduct of the times, but the bowl games don't mean as much as they used to. If you're not in the playoff, you are what you are.
And it's almost worse for Iowa because I don't expect a lot of guys to opt out. There'll probably be one or two, but like you'll have a mostly full strength Iowa team going into a bowl, and I expect whoever they play to have a bunch of opt-outs, right? And so when you lose a game like that, like Iowa-Tennessee a couple of years ago, where now we know that Nico's a good quarterback and da-da-da, but like going into it, Tennessee has a bunch of guys out, Iowa doesn't. It's like, all right, we should win, and then you get blown out in a game like that. It hurts even a little bit worse. This game specifically, we've mentioned Dylan Raiola a couple of times, will not play, obviously. TJ Lateef will make his third start for the Huskers. The win against UCLA where he played pretty good. A loss to Penn State where he did not play well. You have to think Iowa's defense has a chance. And I was just trying to look. TJ Hall going through warm-ups. TJ Hall got smoked a couple of years ago after Cooper DeJean. It'd be a really nice kind of redemption arc for him as a senior to come in and have a good game. He's had a very good season, both in coverage and tackling, going through warm-ups. So he's still questionable, but I think maybe optimistic that he'll play today. But you have to think Iowa's defense has a good chance. Their defensive line has made a couple of really big plays in this series the last couple of years. A chance to make this a long day for TJ Lateef and certainly the passing game of Nebraska.
Yeah, and we've seen Phil Parker be really aggressive defensively this season. And if there's one thing that I think is just going to be turkey on a platter for him today is a young, kind of relatively inexperienced quarterback. Big moment, big rivalry game. I could see Phil dialing up the pressure, especially early on, trying to find the weak links in Nebraska's offensive line and just trying to make life really miserable for him today.
Now, Nebraska can run the ball. Emmett Johnson has over 1,200 yards on the season, a bunch of games over 100 yards. He's been big in the passing game also since Lateef took over, been a big threat there as well. So he's a guy that Iowa's got to find a way to stop. And this is not Oregon's offense, but, man, we've seen Iowa get gashed a couple of times this season in the running game. And so I think that's probably the big focus on both sides of the ball for Iowa and Nebraska. Nebraska establishing that run early and kind of leaning on Iowa and forcing it down their throat. And then Iowa's defense, and especially those linebackers, are they able to contain that? You're not going to stop him. You're not going to stop this run game, but can you contain it enough that you can then score enough to win this game?
Yeah, I don't think today's game is going to come down to putting the ball up in the air. I think it's going to come down to who does the best job controlling the line of scrimmage, who does the best job carrying the ball, and most importantly, which team doesn't turn the ball over on offense today. If Iowa can keep a clean sheet and not turn things over, I think they're, is this the Kamari Moulton game? Do we see him, finally, I feel like a broken record here, bringing him up all the time. But this game sets up, I think, for an Iowa running back to have a big day today. And odds are that it would be Kamari.
Yeah, he hasn't hit 100 yards in a game yet this season. Was over 100 against Penn State, but then lost like 8 yards on his last play and had like 98 for the game. It's felt all season like he's been close to breaking a big one. A couple of shoestring tackles, a couple of late, it's like, he gets up, he's so upset because he saw it right there and he wasn't able to do it. Is this year is this the game he's able to do it? Nebraska defense does struggle against the run. They're giving up about 5 yards a carry. And then Iowa's rushing attack is not just Kamari Moulton and that stable of running backs. You've got Mark Gronowski,
Yeah.
again, in his final game, so you don't really, I mean, you have the bowl, but you don't really have to save him for anything. He can go all out today and run the ball, both scrambling and design runs. And then you got Caden Weechin in the running game and some of those end arounds and some of those, trickier plays that they work him into. And so, yeah, this feels like, as you said, don't put the ball up a bunch unless you have to on either side, and kind of whichever team is able to control the line of scrimmage and establish the run is going to be successful today.
And there's no Big Ten championship to hide anything for. You got a bowl game. If you've got anything, if Tim Lester or Phil Parker is sitting on anything today that they've been waiting to break out, bust it loose. Today is the day to show it, because really you have nothing to lose at this point. And I say that, and fans will say, well, yeah, you got the game to lose, but 8-4 and 7-5 are different shades of the same lipstick at this point.
Does this game mean anything legacy-wise for Mark Gronowski? Now, there was a moment in this season, even after a couple of losses to Iowa State and Indiana, where I think it was the last Hawks on Tap show I did. Chad Lysico and I were in Ankeny, and it was leading up to that Oregon game. And it was like, hey, this could be like a Brad Banks level season for Mark Gronowski, where you play 1 year, but you lead the team to some high heights, and you do something, that people haven't done before, and you short of build a statue, but you become a Hawkeye legend in just the one season. I think that's out the window at this point, right? But he could become kind of a cog in the new offense under Kirk Ferentz with Tim Lester. He can maybe be that transition point from terrible quarterback play to solid quarterback play. We'll see how it goes ahead of him, but he's played big in big moments. He's got a lot of wins. What does this game mean for his legacy as an Iowa Hawkeye?
I think you hit the nail on the head. He's not going to be a Brad Banks type. He's not going to go down as even a Nathan Chandler type, a one guy, 1 year, 10 wins type of season. But when you've been at Iowa as long as Kirk Ferentz has, and they've got that string of consistency, you basically have kept the boat afloat for another season. And, you didn't take a step backwards. And I think in this day and age with the portal and how quickly things can go south for programs, the fact that he was able to lead them to a likely 8-4 season and keep them buoyant, if you will, before we turn things over to whatever quarterback gets the reins next year, if it's Helinski or somebody else. I think that's part of his legacy here at this point. And he's played in so many of those South Dakota State, North Dakota State. I mean, he understands rivalry games. And I think this is going to be another opportunity for him to maybe give Hawkeye fans one more positive memory of him, because let's be honest here, this was supposed to be, with bringing him in, this was supposed to be a big shot at doing something this year and maybe making a playoff run, especially given the schedule. And they fell short of that. But this is a guy who wants to play on Sundays, and he's looking to get as much good film out there as possible. And he's only got a couple more opportunities to do that in a Hawkeye uniform. So I think, again, I don't think the conditions play into his hands too well for that today, because I don't know how often they're going to throw the ball. But he's running out of opportunities to let people notice him for the next level. And I would expect him to play in the bowl game, but I do know that he does want to play on Sundays, and he seems like the kind of guy that will see this through to the end and won't be. And now, of course, that will be the discussion for the next month, is should Iowa bench him? And it's all about the future. And I've been in Kirk's camp for the most part, that it's a reward for the current season and the guys that got you there. But I can see it both ways, and we'll deal with that when we get to it.
Well, another thing we'll deal with when we get to, this is a big debate I've seen in Hawkeye Nation as we've gone through this week, and certainly will amp up a lot over these next few weeks when the transfer portal starts to open and you start to look ahead to next season. I've seen a lot of people say, hey, we're done with these transfer quarterbacks, these one-and-done guys. It's been a mixed bag, I think, at best, right? You had a terrible, terrible outcome with Cade McNamara, about as bad as it could possibly go. And with Gronowski, again, not as good as it could possibly go, but it's certainly been better. You have Jeremy Heklinski, you have Hank Brown, you've got a couple of guys in that quarterback room. It's now Tim Lester's quarterback room, right? These are guys that he handpicked, that he brought into the program, that he has tried to develop. We've seen Iowa really struggle developing quarterbacks under Kirk Ferentz for 27 years. Is Tim Lester the guy who can kind of make that happen? And the debate I've seen, Todd, is, do you go with one of these younger guys and try to develop a multi-year starter and try to kind of get that going? Because ultimately, if that can be successful, that's the better way to go, right? You'd rather have a guy who can start for 3 years and know your program and all of that and play well than a guy you have to pay a couple of $1 million to come in and play for one season. But Iowa has really, really struggled to do that. And there are going to be guys out there who are available to come in. Not just guys like Sam Levitt, who are probably going to go to big programs, but there will be other Gronowski level guys at the FCS and at lower levels who can come up and play, and you can go and get and bring into a Hawkeye uniform, whether that's for one season or more than one. Generally, obviously, there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of variables. We don't know. I'm not going to hold your feet to this next year, but generally, which direction do you think Iowa should go? Transfer quarterback or stick with what they have and try to develop from inside the program?
Yeah, I think as strange as this is to say, I think Iowa probably continues to go back to the transfer quarterback route. If you look around the Big Ten, more teams are doing it than not, seemingly. You can't always be Illinois, where you got Allgaier for a couple years and you got him to come back this year. Look at Wisconsin, went and dipped into the transfer portal and brought in Billy Edwards from Maryland. Indiana's number 2 in the country, and they brought in back-to-back transfer quarterbacks. Yeah. And you can talk about Fernando Mendoza all you want coming from Cal, but the guy before that, Curtis Rourke, that's a MAC quarterback coming in. So the talent is out there, and I just think it's a lot easier to run to the store and buy a loaf of bread than it is to try to make your own, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't make good bread at home, but it's just more convenient when you can look at it on the shelf and have a good idea what you're buying. And quarterbacks are expensive. You can make the argument all you want, and maybe they'd be better off taking that money, putting it into a pool of 2 players or 3 players instead of going all in on the quarterback. And maybe next year Jeremy Helinski takes that job and gives them a little bit of a respite from having to play the portal roulette. But I just think for so many programs in this day and age, it just makes a lot of sense to look and see who's there in the transfer portal. And all of the time and the effort that goes into developing a quarterback in today's game, to have to think about, is this guy going to go in the portal and go somewhere else? Yeah. So when you talk about how important it is to develop quarterbacks, I think just given where the game is now, you do have to remind yourself, is it really worth the effort to go get these high school quarterbacks and to try to develop them, knowing that there's a 50-50 shot that they're going to leave you, and all the fruits of your efforts are going to be enjoyed by an Ohio State or a TCU or Texas Tech, somebody that comes in and pays big money for it. So I'm comfortable with the way Kirk Ferentz and Tim Lester have been doing it so far here. And you just have to avoid the landmines, the Cade McNamara type situation, especially that wound up being a multi-year situation that really didn't really move the program forward or do them any good.
And really hurt the perception of how Iowa can do in the transfer portal. I think for a while now, it's going to be, if they bring in a quarterback, there's the worry that you got another lemon like Cade McNamara. And then, as you mentioned,
don't use that word with a car guy. Don't use the word with a guy that helps sell cars.
Hey, you want not a lemon? Castle Motors. That's your
There
place.
You go. Hey, we're open till 6 o'clock today. Give me a call.
No lemons on the lot. And as you mentioned, you spread the wealth a little bit. If you have that money and you don't need to spend it on a quarterback, as Andrew Shipley points out here, hey, we need a linebacker. We need a shutdown corner. We're going to have to rebuild an offensive line that's full of seniors. We're going to have to rebuild a defensive line that's full of seniors. Iowa can use that money elsewhere to bring in other portal guys, because the portal is a thing. You're not going to develop every position, but it'll be interesting to see. The last thing on quarterbacks before we move to basketball here, Todd, Hawk and North Liberty brings this up. Does Iowa need a good passing quarterback that could run, or a good running quarterback that can pass? I think one thing we've learned this year is having a guy who can move, having a guy who can be part of the running game, not just scrambling, not just getting out of bad situations, but be a true part of the running game is really, really important in Tim Lester's offense. Iowa's offense doesn't need to be high flying and high scoring, but they can be very effective if you have a quarterback who can move a little bit. You can't have a pocket passer. You can't have a statue back there anymore. It's just not going to work in this day and age.
Shout out to Hawk in North Liberty. I lived in North Liberty for a number of years. Great. Not a little town anymore that's really exploded.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think Kirk Ferentz has realized that, man, when you have a mobile quarterback that is also capable of throwing the football, but teams have to worry about what he can do. And I've talked a lot about where would this team be without Caden Weechin. I think if you took Caden Weechin off this team and you took Gronowski's legs off this team, they'd look completely different, because there were a lot of times this year where Gronowski's offense was primarily carrying the ball. And it's been so long since they've had a mobile quarterback that you had to worry about if you were an opposing defense. That I just think that era is here, and you got to embrace it. And it just gives a defense something else to worry about. So I think Kirk Ferentz has had his eyes open a little bit. The days of the statue, the guy, a Nate Stanley, or the big quarterbacks that aren't necessarily mobile. Now, Stanley was great when you needed a sneak.
Yeah.
Stanley wasn't going to run 10, 15 yards for you the way that Gronowski can. So
yeah,
I think it gives you another weapon to keep in the back of your pocket. So I think Iowa would be really well suited to continue going down that road.
About 40 minutes away from kickoff in Lincoln, Iowa-Nebraska, an 11 a.m. kick in the Heroes game, the final regular season game here on Black Friday for Iowa and Nebraska. Move to basketball here, and one last chance, hashtag Koch, K-O-C-H. However you're watching, however you're joining us, hashtag Koch. We're going to give away 2 tickets to Iowa Bucknell at the Casey Center. It's Saturday, December 20th. It's a Saturday right before Christmas, a 5 o'clock tip. I'm going to be courtside. Let's go.
So I hear.
Join me. But yeah, hashtag Koch to win those tickets. We will give those away here in about 10 minutes. But hey, your Iowa Hawkeyes are Acrisure Classic Group 2 champions, whatever the hell that means. What it does mean, Todd, is that they passed their first real test this season. That game against Ole Miss, who's previously unbeaten, a great coach in Chris Beard, a program that's kind of on the rise, and you came through a huge game out of Bennett Sturts, and then you had to go back-to-back in kind of a tournament atmosphere and play a Grand Canyon team that's not great, but had some crowd there, right? And you didn't play real well. You weren't the offense wasn't quite there against Grand Canyon. Those are games where in the past Iowa has found ways to lose that game, and so in both of those games, kind of came through, found ways to win. And before you head into this really tough stretch of games, you feel pretty good about this 7-0 Hawkeye basketball team.
Yeah, I keep looking at Iowa State, and I'm not looking forward to that game. They look like a just absolute buzzsaw this year. But if you would have told me, back when we were doing, I think the last show in person together, we kind of touched on basketball for the first time. If you would have told me that they had gotten through the first 7 games without at least suffering one defeat, I don't think I would have believed you. And it's further going to back up what I think you and I said that night here in Cedar Rapids on the northeast side of town, is that this is just going to be a fun team to watch. And we got together, my friends and I got together a couple weeks ago. We were back in town for a friend's mother's funeral, and we watched the Xavier game. And it was just fun to sit around and drink some beers and be invested and excited in Iowa basketball again. And I think it's not going to be too long before those seats are filled at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And I think Ben McCollum has proven early on that he's the guy that Beth Getz thought she was getting when she brought him in from Drake after 1 year. So I keep Bennett Sturts healthy, wrap him in bubble wrap, have someone shovel his driveway for him, don't get him the yak tracks so that he doesn't slip and fall in the storm or whatever and blow out an ACL. But this team's more than Bennett Sturts at this point. And I think that's the that's what I've found to be most pleasing here, is that you're seeing other guys step up. You mentioned Cooper Koch, who is, I think, he could go down as a folk hero if things really go well for the Hawkeyes this season.
Yes.
The one guy that, it was a two-way street. Ben McCollum wanted him to stick around, but he also wanted to stick around and be in a Hawkeye legacy. I think he's got a chance to be a fan favorite this season. And I can't say enough good things about him, but that's because they're 7-0. We'd be doing the opposite if they were 0-7. But like you said, they passed the first test. They went up against a very good coach and a Power 4, Power 5 team, and they took care of business. They did what they needed to do, and so I just there's no point in looking for nits to pick with this team yet until they're there. Sit back and enjoy 7-0.
Yeah, love the poise. Love the defensive intensity. Love the methodical offense. I mean, I'm still so conditioned by the McCaffrey era that those extra passes feel strange to me.
Yeah.
So many times I'm expecting a shot early in the shot clock. And the McCaffrey teams took the first open shot they could get. That's how they played. This is not what that team is. This team is more like a Hoosiers team where it's, hey, you have to pass 4 times before you take a shot or whatever it was. And so I'm still getting used to that, but the efficiency is off the charts. I mean, they're still scoring high numbers, not every game.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite moments, Todd, was against Grand Canyon. Iowa goes on like an 8 or 9 minute field goal drought, and in the McCaffrey era, that spells doom.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if you're up 10, it's tied or you're down at the end of that. If you're tied when that happens, you're losing by 10 and the game gets out of hand, right? What happened during that 8-9 minute stretch against Grand Canyon, Iowa extended its lead by 1. That's defense, right? And that's the thing that all Iowa fans have been yelling at their TVs, yelling inside Carver Hawkeye Arena for the last 15 years is, hey, you're not going to shoot the hell out of the ball every night. Some nights you are, and you're going to be able to beat anybody. But when the offense isn't there, when it's not clicking, when the shots aren't going in, what do you have to fall back on? This team had very little to fall back on under Fran McCaffrey. It's got this defense to fall back on right now, and you're able to stay in games. You're able to stay engaged. And so that for me has been one of the most enjoyable things is just the confidence that, hey, if Iowa has a bad shooting night, if Bennett Sturts isn't scoring 29 points, there are going to be games where this team doesn't have it. Can they find ways to win other than just outscoring teams? And I feel like this team under Ben McCollum can.
Yeah, and not to get way out over the skis or cart before the horse here, but when you look at the NCAA tournament, teams that play defense tends to give you a little bit of an equalizer in the tournament, as opposed to I've seen some high-scoring teams that go into the NCAA tournament, and that's the one game in 3 weeks where they can't find a bucket, and they wind up getting upset or they wind up losing in that second round. So the defensive effort has been there for this team. And like you said, an 8, 9, 10-minute scoring drought was forget about it in the past. And now you've got the defensive intensity, and this team can survive those droughts here. And they are fun to watch. And I know we've got those tickets. I believe that Saturday is my wife's grandmother's 100th birthday party. So we'll not be able to make the trip to Des Moines to the Casey's Center, but that Bucknell game should be another, good challenge. Bucknell's a good basketball program. You hear their name every once in a while when it comes to NCAA tournament time, but I'm looking forward to the Iowa State game just from a standpoint of let's see how this team can do against, and I will use the word elite. An elite team, because that Iowa State team looks fantastic.
Tough stretch now, right? Like you're done. You have a couple of those games, coming up later, but now you go into the meat of this schedule. You have at Michigan State at the Breslin Center on Tuesday. Always a tough place to play. Iowa's had some success there recently, but that's going to be a real big test for Bennett Sturts and this entire team. Then home against Maryland next Saturday, which is a game. Like, let's fill the arena. Come on. It's a Big Ten game. It's Saturday. This team is 7-0, potentially ranked when the rankings come out Monday. Like, let's get behind this team now if we're ever going to. And then, as you said, a really good Iowa State team in a really tough place to play in Hilton Coliseum in a couple of weeks. What are your expectations for this stretch? I mean, 7-0 now. Are they 7-3 2 weeks from now? Are they 8-2? I mean, what's like where are we sitting when we're here a couple of weeks from now?
So I've never been a big fan of the two early Big Ten games. And my approach now this year, I am interested because I want to see what Ben McCollum's team can do. My approach has always been to get through those first two Big Ten games at least 1-1.
Yeah.
You don't want to be 0-2 in the conference standings for a month. So, and I agree with you. The complaints about not supporting the basketball team or not by people want weekend games and they want marquee opponents. So here you go. You've got a weekend game against a Big Ten opponent. That's 15,000. That should be 15,000 people there because they're going to need that extra man at times this year because this team isn't the most naturally God-gifted, talented team in Big Ten basketball. But I hate to say, 1-2 is probably realistic here. The Iowa State team is so good, and I could see that one maybe getting out of hand. But if you could get through these three games, these three tough games, with one win and be competitive in at least one of the other two. Yeah. And if they can go toe to toe with Iowa State and not get blown out, I think that's another sort of feather in the cap here too. But realistically, 1-2 over this 3-game stretch, and it's still not going to change what I think of this team.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right there with you. All right, let's add 2 people to the crowd at the KC Center. Against Bucknell. Hashtag Koch was the hashtag. We're going to do the drawing right now. A pair of tickets and a $25 gift card to Buzzard Billy's goes to the winner here. Who's going to see them? I'll be there. I'll be courtside. Gabeezer. Gabe Esser, probably, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I read it the same way that you did. It was like Gabeezer.
Gabeezer, 7852. Gabe Esser. Whatever your name is, give me an email, ad@iowaeverywhere.com, ad@iowaeverywhere.com. Let me know you won. We will get you those tickets and that gift card. And hey, if you're able to walk down to courtside, give me a high five.
And they have I like Buzzard Billy's. They got some good appetizers and some good drinks on tap, and it's a great place to check out before you head into an event there at the KC Center.
Very last thing, Todd, what's your prediction for today's game? We're half an hour away from kickoff. Does Iowa get the win? Do they win big? Is it another last-second field goal? What happens in Lincoln today?
I think Iowa wins this game today 20-13. How about that? I don't think there's going to be any dramatics at the end. I think they are, again, just like last week against Michigan State, they're the better team. The thing that concerns me about this is twofold, the fact that it's on the road and the fact that Nebraska does have the similar record, and picking up another win for them probably means a hell of a lot for whatever bowl selection committee is going to want 25,000 Husker fans coming. Hopefully not all like Cooter Ray. They won't all have the piss stains in the overalls, but that's what concerns me here is there is something to play for Nebraska, and that the game is on the road in Lincoln. But I wasn't too impressed with what they did basically what they didn't do against Penn State last week. I watched the majority of that game, and this sets up well for Iowa. It's going to be cold, and they played in plenty of those cold, miserable, low-scoring games over there in Lincoln. And as you went over the record earlier in the show, they won the majority of them. So I don't see any reason that changes today.
I picked the Hawkeyes to win, and man, I'm looking back at my prediction in the Randy Peterson column at iowaeverywhere.com, and I had Iowa 28-10. So I guess I'm sticking with it. I don't feel as confident now as I did Monday, I guess, when I made that prediction. But hey, blowout Hawks, right? Let's go.
It is Gabe Esser. He's confirmed the pronunciation down in the comments. So, and Gabe knows where to find you.
Todd, thank you so much for today. Thank you so much for all season. Hopefully we'll keep doing this kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. Check out Todd at Castle Motors. Hey, go get yourself a car and go talk a little Hawks with my guy. Follow us, like and subscribe. It does really help us. Liking and subscribing on social media, on YouTube. We always appreciate it. We appreciate all the love, all the support. I will be back as soon as this game ends with Chris Hassel on Instant Iowa across all these Iowa Everywhere channels. Thank you so much for spending your Friday morning with us. Have a great Black Friday. Go Hawks. This is Iowa Everywhere.